Hello, and welcome to Cognitum, a show dedicated to the present and future of science and technology. I'm your host, Iosif Gershteyn. Our guest today is Dr. Petranovich, director of the Abigail Adams Institute in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Previously, Dr. Petranovich taught political science at Duke University and Yale. His scholarly expertise is 19th century European and American political and social thought, and he is currently writing a book for Yale University Press on nationalism in the North in antebellum America. Welcome.
Good evening, Iosif, and thank you for having me here.
My pleasure. So, tell me, how does technology interact with humanistic knowledge? Does it change it? Is it the same? Is it irrelevant?
Yes, very good. So I presume that what we mean in this context, or I will presume what we mean in this context, is some of these new technologies in the plural that have come into the classroom, most particularly MOOCs, online learning, cameras or taping classroom, taping lectures, recording lectures rather, use of computers in the classroom, laptops, iPhones, but also maybe even various merging of social media functions and education. Absolutely, it changes the way we teach and the way humanistic knowledge is transferred, taught and transferred. And again, in some, I'm not one of these people who thinks that technology only or takes away merely or mostly takes away from humanistic learning, liberal arts learning. In fact, I do think there's certain great benefits to technology in the classroom, in interaction between scholars and teachers and students. However, there are also problems. We talked the last time I was here about Socrates and his dialectic method or his conversational approach in the Athenian agora. And that was a very direct sort of disintermediated way of speaking with other human beings in small settings, one-on-one or in small groups. Very rarely does Socrates speak in front of a rare group at his trial, most notably being the big one, several hundred people, 500 jurors, where he has to defend himself. And even that crowd is nothing compared to the number of people who will see this video in interaction, for example. There is, the purists would say the best kind of education is disintermediated education, person to person, human being to human being, tailored education, customized, as we might say today, to the needs, to the soul of the person's speaking. And there's always interesting in Socratic education, or Socratic method, as it's sometimes known, the conversation or the speech. This is another interesting thing about Platonic dialogues and Socrates, is never between equals. It is always between a teacher and a student, or even Socrates is on one occasion more a student and learning from a teacher, but almost always Socrates is in the, let's say, hierarchy, superior position, as it were. That we're in our egalitarian, technically egalitarian age, we're uncomfortable with that. So in technology, when it intrudes, as it were, when it interferes or comes into the educational environment, does have a certain leveling effect. So, for example, we're recording this interaction, and it will be available to spectators and viewers at a time of their choosing, presumably somewhere out there on the internet. That must change somehow or affect what is being taught here and transmitted. We're not talking privately here or directly. The technology is somehow intermediating here. Okay, maybe that's a little abstract, maybe not. More specifically, from my own experience, I am forbidding, almost in all cases, the use of laptop in the seminar setting. And in the lecture setting, when I taught a big lecture class at Duke University, I couldn't quite do it. I probably should have done it. I didn't do it. Certainly in a seminar setting, which is 10 to 20 people at most, ideally 10 to 15, and an instructor or a couple of instructors. I like that approach as well. You want full attention. No one taking notes on their computer or looking at on the internet or whatever, texting. Or you want traditional ways of both taking notes and interacting. So it adds a certain intensity and again disintermediates and focuses attention. That's one way I think that we can, if we have sufficient discipline, we can control technology in the classroom or cabinet. But there are other ways where we can't as much. We pretty much modern student. I remember I was in school in the late 90s, in college in the late 90s. I didn't have a computer. I did not have a laptop. I used the general computer in the basement of various science centers or whatever, and it was hard to walk in the middle of the winter across a couple of blocks to use it, but something that today modern student doesn't even consider. So everybody has a laptop. It's like right there. It's available. Everything is easy, fast. Obviously, I don't have to enumerate the advantages of that, but there are certain disadvantages that you can immediately, we see this maybe mostly with Zoom and other in our COVID era of interacting, you can immediately start a meeting, start a conversation, and then as soon as you're done, you can immediately shut it down. There is no warm-up, there is no cooling down where the human element comes in, where you can ask a follow-up question or even come to the side with the instructor or a friend and ask for a clarification, where this kind of technological surveillance, if I can dramatize it a little bit, makes us uncomfortable. I'm certainly uncomfortable to some extent, and being on camera in this interaction, and it certainly changes how I speak to you and with you on these and other subjects. Okay, I'll stop there. I know you'll have follow-up questions. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mainly about attention spans and mainly about focusing attention. In our time, especially in the age of the smartphone, our attention is constantly divided, and our attention is doled out usually in very, very, very small and very, very, very short bursts that are overlapping with other short bursts at the same time because you got 12 notifications on your phone.
Yeah. We were making Iosif, I was talking about marketing director at the Abigail Adams Institute. We're trying to make certain spots or videos, advertising, introducing us to the students who maybe are not aware of us or have forgotten about us. And our consultants say the ideal little video is like something like 10 to 12 seconds long. The way to reach the student, if you're reaching them through Twitter, Instagram, through these Facebook social media platforms. In other words, a 30-minute interview, an hour interview is out of the question. Very few people will watch it through the end or engage with it, or and at least the first interaction. So that's fascinating that we're kind of primed, the students, but also adults too. I've been exposed to this. We want these shorter. We become addicted to shorter, more get to the point sort of messages. And that does affect our time. It makes us more antsy, makes us more distractible, makes it harder to read a book or close a computer. We have my phone buzzing, your phone buzzing all the time if you're not careful to turn it off. All of those are distractions that erode our attention span, our concentration, and I think in my case certainly make us more moody and because I remember how it was when you didn't even have a computer, when you could actually seclude yourself in the library for hours at the time and force yourself to read a book or grapple with just one argument at the time. Let's say, I got bored, let me go. Today, if you try to do that, it's very hard for me to do that today, because I'd want to check the news or something like that, or you can check the stock market or the presidential polls, or you can check the if somebody, if your family or friends emailed you or texted you. We're almost always have these devices on, and they harm us that way. So certainly that, and we know that moreover this attention economy is using this attention economy as the business model of a lot of the socials, and it seems like that's where the action is, and it's very hard to counteract those new innovations today.
But would you say that these short attention spans prevent us from taking in the important work, from interacting with and engaging with the serious ideas, the humanistic knowledge that our culture has created?
Yes, yeah. I mean, I'll tell you, they help you. I guess this is from my very so far limited experience of adopting some of these models to lure some talented students into the institute and our work. They inform. You can get more information across in shorter amount of time. You can get more images across. You can get more, quotation, more information across. But you certainly, that's one thing, kind of awareness, blanketing people with very superficial first level of knowledge or information. To get to knowledge it requires going a layer below that, and that requires time and reflection and wrestling with an idea that's presented or even an image that's presented. And another layer below that is wisdom, if you want to grow or approach wisdom, that you have to sit and live with these books and do it with friends and with in a community of intellectual friendship. That takes more discipline, but it also takes time. There are no shortcuts, I would argue, for that kind of deeper engagement with ideas and with friends and in community and in genuine friendship. So we have to find a way where we leverage, as they say today, right, these new technologies and the way they can introduce us to all sorts of different information, very broad kinds of information, but we don't want to become too reliant on that and kind of do it at the expense of this deeper, more foundational knowledge.
You want to make sure to use technology as a tool, not have technology use you as a tool.
Yes, and how possible that is a big question. Recently, we had an event at the Abigail Adams Institute about technology and technique and how it tends to colonize the human mind and even the human spirit and left to itself. In other words, there's in some sense, can we use it only as a tool is a big question. Of course, different schools of thought on this. Or is it something that if it becomes a part of you or part of the way we do things, can we simply leave it behind and go back to the way things were, or does it fundamentally transform us in the process? That's a question. I'm certainly always looking to master my tools and not let them master me, but I don't know how successful I am.
Well, most of political discourse now happens on Twitter. It is the new public square. Twitter, Facebook, but mainly Twitter. Yeah. And they have very strict limitations on character count. I believe it's 240, 180, 240 characters. And this has been driving our political discourse for some time, rather than the form of a book or a treatise on politics. Not to say that has been driving our politics
right.
before that, but we went from pamphlets,
that's right.
All the way to sound bites, and now to Twitter. Do you think that Twitter, given the state of the world as it is, do you think that our discourse is irrevocably changed and it's constantly getting more and more short form, or is it creating an opportunity for real intellectual debate? With such as like the Joe Rogan podcast, the Eric Weinstein podcast, these sort of alternative platforms that a very small minority, but interested individuals can go to.
Yeah, very, very, very good question. Kind of going, somewhat outside my area of expertise, but I was a political scientist at once, so I do have some expertise to comment on this, and I'm obviously an informed citizen. Again, to some extent, like you are as well. I am, it cuts both ways, right? I think without Twitter, for example, 5 years ago or so, with the advent of Donald Trump, as it were, I don't think he would have been able to reach the people and the audiences that he reached precisely using Twitter to disintermediate other forms of media, including mainstream cable channels and the commercials, political commercials made by these expert consultants, political consultants, and others, right? So he certainly a leader or a politician, if you will. Some people call Trump a demagogue, in another ancient Greek word, is able to speak directly to the people without the intermediation of a party or media or any kind of other layer. And of course, that can be a good thing and a bad thing, or a bad thing. But it's certainly with us to stay, I think, this new way of communicating. It has supplanted some of the other gatekeepers and other media structures. The other thing you mentioned is all the proliferation of these podcasts or YouTube channels, and it's fragmented our political space, but also our education space as well. The possibilities are seemingly endless. There's so much good stuff and so much more bad stuff out there in terms of interesting and promising pathways of opinion journalism or even educational programs. There's treasures out there on YouTube, on Twitter, brilliant people communicating brilliantly, I would submit, right, with us. But there's also, just to put it directly, trash out there. There's also not just in terms of so-called fake news, but also the form of, if you don't know if you're not adept at a certain technology, you generally it doesn't look good, doesn't do good. But it does, I do think, you use the word irrevocably, Iosif, I do think it does change us in the way we do both education and politics. I don't think there's not going back. I think we're going to have to find ways to become more aware. I think what we need to do, first of all, awareness is so important. We have to be aware of the existing technologies and the way they're going, the way they're moving, what's the next phase, what's the next innovation, what's the general trend of it, and use it as much as possible to our advantage, and as much as possible seek to build real live communities in addition to digital communities. I think digital is inescapable. It's going to be some kind of a blend or mix. But the last thing we would want to do is move all education or all interaction, all politics, certainly all human encounters online. That would be a disaster, I think. We definitely want to find spaces that are free from technological intrusion and even technological surveillance. Again, I'm fasting on that phrase. But I do think it's going to become a more and more precious realm. I mean, you never know now with drones and with your devices plugged in here and there in the house. Is there a space that is, truly intimate and truly private, and even in one's own house? One wonders. And I think preserving a certain opacity is very desirable in our societies. I mean, usually, something you call something opaque or non-transparent, it's sinister, dark, and carries very negative connotations. But I think certainly when it comes to, education or even friendship, I think a degree of opacity is desirable.
So, given the state of affairs, that this isn't going away, Twitter, Facebook are public squares.
Yeah.
How do you think they're failing us? And do you think that philosophy? Do you think that we have a way to inject or introduce wisdom into a platform that seems manufactured to block it?
Yeah, right. That's a tough one. That's a tough one. Many people are thinking about that. They're realizing there's this early promise of the internet, right? In the 90s, even the early 2000s, it seemed so much more, idealistic, hopeful. Now we've rethought that for all sorts of reasons. I mean, there is. Here's one small beginning of an answer, or maybe a very, very partial stab or answer to that question. Is I do think the advertising model with the business model with things like with platforms, as they call them now, like Facebook, for example, is probably, we see how that leads to perverse incentives, and how that gets out of control fairly quickly and unproductively. Maybe move to a subscriber model can undo some of the worst effects of these particular technologies. Yeah, I'm afraid I don't have more to contribute on this, except again to reiterate that we should seek, if at all possible, to use these technologies to use them to connect with people we wouldn't connect with, but then to leave them behind, if at all possible, and build in personal communities, and try to wean ourselves off the addiction. Now, we need them for work. We don't just need them for friendship or for play or for pleasure. That becomes harder to wean oneself off all of these very nifty technologies and efficient technologies. But efficiency is only one value among many, and certainly when it comes to more nobler things like friendship and philosophy, it certainly needs to know its place, which is a subordinate place. Yeah.
Do you think that technology, do you think we should be inspired by technology, that it could help us achieve direction in life, that it could help us get to where we need to be going?
I think inspired is a word I like a lot. Certainly I'm inspired by many things, but some things more than others. People, mostly ideas. Yeah, I mean, even technology, or what is it? A humanly made a concoction can also be impressive, can be powerful, and inspiring. Yeah, sure, can be inspiring. Maybe we should put it this way: it should inspire us to go for pursue nobler dreams, improve ourselves. But does it, or does it tire us out? Sometimes I wonder about that. I mean, I can speculate a little about this if you allow me. I wonder if it doesn't, and certainly this is my experience in many cases, sometimes technology which brings us an abundance of information, an abundance of configurations, different ways of seeing things, reality, sometimes overwhelms and tires one. And again, I'm speaking just from a narrow perspective here in my world. As I mentioned to you earlier, there is sort of cordoning off or finding ways to cabin technology and enabling us to encounter life, the world, without its intrusion, can also bring us back. Again, even while knowing the technology is there in the background, still can also help us in certain ways. Now, I don't know what you had in mind. Can you give me an example of what you had in mind with using technology to inspire us, science and technology to inspire us to go forward? Maybe I'm missing the thrust of your question.
Well, when we go around to read the philosophers,
yeah,
especially when we're trying to seek meaning in life and we're trying to seek direction, a starting point, something to believe in, something to move towards, there's clearly value in certain philosophers for different people, maybe different ones. And it seems that more and more people aren't turning to the classics, they're turning to Facebook.
Right.
And seeking approval, likes, and other motivations.
Right.
And what I'm asking really is do you think that there is a way that we could take this very, very potent, persuasive technology of Facebook, of Twitter, of Instagram, and instead of bringing out the worst in us, it could bring out the best in us. It could get us further, closer to the truth, closer to where we should be going and along the right path.
Yeah, no, okay. Thank you for clarifying or restating. So one level, it better do that, or we need it to do that is one answer, but that's more of an exhortation rather than a philosophical reflection. How about this? I mean, the technology of the Platonic dialogue. So as you know, Socrates never wrote down anything. He just talked, or not just, but he talked, and he thought, and he pushed people, and it was all, if it was, Plato recorded it, which is how we know of Socrates, or Plato's Socrates. But Socrates believed, presumably, this is by his example, that the real kind of learning takes place. The real insight is face to face, human being to human being, eye to eye, as it were, not even intermediated with a text or with a book, right? Let alone with a tweet or with an image or with a stream, which is going further down stream here. So what am I saying? Don't read books? No, of course not, or Platonic dialogues for that matter. But there is a real insight here, which is we need to be together and in person and wrestle with some of these big questions together. Yes, with the aid of books, which is a form of technology, and hopefully with these new technologies. Bring them in, but bring them in with all the awareness of their deficiencies as well as their promises. I think never stop thinking about the double-edged sword that comes with these new digital technologies, in particular in the realm of education and philosophy. I think that's important. Perhaps the one practical lesson I can give. Now, how do we measure success there? People might want to ask, how do we know if we are successful? Well, I think if we are preserving, even in this digital age, overwhelmingly digital age, if we are preserving human communities, if we're not, even when it's cold, if we're still gathering together outside and going for walks and meeting up with each other, even when it's inconvenient, if we're not just, falling back into whatever's the more easy and the more efficient and the more technologically driven way of interaction. That might be one metric of success, if we don't stop gathering together, small communities. Yeah. Breaking bread together over, let's not do it online and watch each other eat, right? Yeah.
So yes, to move forward, we have to do it together.
Yeah, yeah, and in person. I would say in person is very, 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 very important. You could collaborate. We can collaborate online. We could have done this interview over Zoom. It would have been maybe more efficient and more pleasant in some way. I had to drive 35 minutes, even encountered some traffic, even the COVID era, right? I had to put on this suit and even shoes and whatnot. It would have been faster, and I would have had more control maybe in my own setting. I probably would have had my Abigail Adams banner behind and what I would have been able to choreograph things, and maybe you could have had a nicer fancier background with maybe Socrates and Plato, the academy behind me. But so it's kind of harder to make this trip, to find this location, but I'm glad I did this. I think this is, I would say, more real than that other interaction. There's something more real. We had a more of a encounter this way than over Zoom. And I know we're going to dinner afterwards, and I think that's going to be even more of an encounter. And who knows what we'll talk about then when people are not watching. Yeah.
So definitely a takeaway would be to meet in person.
Yes.
To meet in person and to spend time discussing the important topics eye to eye.
Yes. Yeah, and see where one wonderful thing about conversation, especially unobserved or unrecorded conversation, is you don't know where it's going to go. And there's an unpredictability and a sense of adventure and the spirit of adventure. That's part of it. If it's too scripted, and whenever somebody's observing from the outside, it has to have that scripted element. But personal conversation can be more, unobserved conversation, more real, more genuine. and hopefully more interesting, maybe, and certainly more dangerous, I think. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Iosif.
Thank you, Danilo. Thank you for joining us today. We hope you join us next time as we examine and elucidate the frontiers of science and technology with the thinkers creating our future.